Billionaire hears poor girl singing lullaby. What she sings makes him cry in despair. The city was a blur of horns, shouts, and glaring lights as the black Bentley crawled along the gridlocked avenue. Inside, Lawrence Blake tapped impatiently on the steering wheel, his Rolex catching a flash of sun through the tinted window. His assistant's voice echoed in his earpiece, reading off schedules and numbers he wasn't listening to. His mind was already at the boardroom 3 miles away. "We'll be late," he muttered. "Tell them to wait." The air in the car was frigid, a sharp contrast to the sticky heat outside. He rolled his neck, exhaled, and turned up the volume on the classical playlist meant to calm his nerves. But it was no use. The chaos outside bled through. Street vendors shouted, engines revved, a child cried somewhere close, too close. Then he heard it. A voice, small, clear, pure, cutting through the city noise like a thread of silver in a storm. A little girl was singing. At first Lawrence didn't care, just another kid, just another noise. But then the melody twisted in his chest, a haunting, fragile tune that stirred something ancient inside him, and the words, "Sleep now, little star. Mama's gone, but not too far." He froze. His blood iced over. He fumbled to roll down the window as his breath caught in his throat. "Close your eyes. No need to fear. I will hold you. I am here." It wasn't possible. That lullaby wasn't just rare. It was never shared. It had been written by someone who no longer existed, his wife, and she had only ever sung it to their son. Lawrence slammed the car door open and stumbled out, nearly tripping on the curb. Horns blared, people shouted, but he saw her, across the sidewalk, sitting on the cracked concrete beside a broken lamppost, a girl no older than 8, dirt-smudged cheeks, bare feet, a torn yellow dress, and in her arms, swaddled tightly, was a baby no bigger than a bundle of rags. She kept singing, rocking the child gently, and Lawrence Blake, billionaire, tycoon, and master of 10 empires, stood paralyzed as his heart shattered, right there in the street. Because that lullaby was never supposed to survive her, and yet, here it was, sung by a stranger who couldn't possibly know. Why? How? Who was this girl? He took one step forward, and then another, unable to breathe. Then the girl looked up, right into his eyes, and smiled. The smile wasn't one of joy. It was soft, weary, like someone who had lived 100 lifetimes in just a few years. Lawrence crouched slowly, knees stiff, unsure what he was even doing. Where did you learn that song?" he asked, voice unsteady, foreign to his own ears. The girl didn't answer right away. She glanced down at the baby in her lap, gently brushing a strand of hair from its face. Then, in a whisper, almost lost to the city's noise, she replied, "My mama sang it. But she said it wasn't hers. She said it came from a dream." Lawrence felt the sidewalk tilt beneath him. The world had become distant, hazy. "Your mother, what's her name?" "Her name was Marie," the girl said, eyes still on the baby. "But she's gone now, just like the lady in the song." Marie. The name hit him like a blade between the ribs. That couldn't be. His Marie had died 9 years ago in a car accident that had also taken their infant son. Or so he had been told. There had been no bodies recovered, just shattered metal and fire. His world had ended in that moment. And yet, this child had just sung a lullaby only Marie had known. A lullaby she'd written in the final weeks of her life, words never published, never recorded, never shared. He felt the burn of tears, foreign and unwanted. "How old are you?" "8, she replied. "Almost 9. 8. The timing, the song, the name. His mind was spinning, trying to fit puzzle pieces that should not even exist in the same box. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice now a tremble. "Hope," she said simply. "Hope." Lawrence's chest ached. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, fumbling to open his contacts. "Where are your parents, Hope? Are you here alone?" "I have the baby," she said quietly. "That's my brother. His name is River. Lawrence's gaze fell to the sleeping infant, pale, thin, but peaceful in her arms. "Where's your home?" "We don't have one," she said with that same weary calm. "We had a place with Mama, but she got sick. Then we had to leave." He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but nothing came out. She looked up at him again, eyes a shade of hazel, too familiar to ignore, and then she said, "You look like him." "Who?" Lawrence rasped. "The man in Mama's photo." He felt his heart miss a beat. "What photo?" Hope reached into a faded backpack beside her and pulled out a worn, creased photograph. She handed it to him wordlessly, and when Lawrence turned it over, he nearly collapsed. It was a picture of him from 10 years ago. Arm around Marie, hand resting on her pregnant belly. Hope tilted her head and asked softly, "Do you know her?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. His fingers trembled as he clutched the photo, the edges worn soft by time and fingers that had clearly held it often. It was real, undeniably real. He remembered the moment it had been taken, a rare day in late summer. Marie had made him laugh, something she used to do so effortlessly. He hadn't seen that picture in years. He'd assumed it was lost forever. The sun dipped behind a tall building, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The noise of the city faded to a dull hum. Lawrence sat beside the girl, knees hitting the hot pavement, unaware of the stares from passers-by. He stared at the photo again, the date in the corner. It was exactly 3 weeks before the accident. "You said your mother's name was Marie," he said slowly, testing the words. "Did she ever talk about your father?" Hope nodded. "Only when she was sad. She said he was lost. Not gone. Just lost. Lost." The word echoed in his skull. He remembered how Marie had looked at him that final morning. They'd argued about business, about money, about how little time he gave to her and the unborn child. She'd said he was slipping away, that he didn't even see her anymore, and she'd left. 3 days later, the accident. But if Hope was telling the truth, if Marie had survived for at least another year after that night. Lawrence pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes. "Did she ever show you anything else? Write anything down?" Hope dug through the backpack again and pulled out a small, tattered journal with a fraying ribbon tied around it. "Mama wrote in this a lot, but most pages are torn. I think she got scared sometimes." He opened it gently. The handwriting was unmistakable, Marie's. But pages were missing, ripped away in chunks. What remained were fragments, snippets of poems, a sketch of a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. One page had just 5 words written over and over again. "He doesn't know. He can't." His throat tightened. The implications were unbearable. He looked at Hope again, her small hand resting protectively on the baby's back. The shape of her nose, the arch of her brow, the uncanny echo of Marie's features in miniature. "You said your brother's name is River." She nodded. "Mama picked it because she said rivers always find their way home." Lawrence blinked hard. Everything, his empire, his money, his power, meant nothing in this moment. Only one thing mattered now. He had to find out if this was real, if she was his, if Marie had lived, and if she'd kept their child alive in hiding. And if so, why? Why had she run? Why had she never come back? Why had she let him mourn them both, while she was still out there? The weight of it all settled on Lawrence like an avalanche. He looked at Hope, then at the journal, the photo still clutched in his other hand. "Where have you been living?" he asked gently. "Mostly under bridges or behind buildings, sometimes shelters," Hope said, almost apologetically. "But they don't like babies crying at night. So we leave before they tell us to." Lawrence's chest constricted, a billionaire surrounded by luxury and comfort, and yet his own blood, if this truly was his daughter, had been sleeping on concrete. "Who helped you after your mother passed?" "No one," she replied. "She told me not to trust anyone, that if people found out, they'd take River away. She made me promise I'd keep him safe." "Why?" he asked, voice breaking. Why would she be so afraid? Hope looked around, then lowered her voice. She said someone was watching us, that after she left the hospital, people kept asking questions, that someone paid to keep her hidden. Lawrence stiffened. What hospital? Hope furrowed her brow. I don't know. I was just a baby when River was born. But Mama said someone paid for everything, and then told her to disappear. His heart pounded in his ears. He remembered the days after the crash. The investigator he hired, the lack of answers, no body, no real confirmation, just fire and silence. He had assumed the worst. But what if someone made sure he did? What if Marie hadn't died at all, but had been hidden? Lawrence turned his head as a dark car pulled up to the curb, black windows and tinted glass. It wasn't his. It didn't belong to anyone he knew. But the back window lowered just slightly, enough for him to see a pair of eyes staring straight at him. Cold, calculating. The window slid back up. The car sped away. Lawrence stood abruptly, heart in his throat. Someone had been watching, and maybe still was. He crouched again. Hope, do you remember anyone who came to see your mother often? Anyone besides you and River? She nodded slowly. There was a man, a big man with a blue suit. He gave Mama money and told her to stay invisible. She cried after he left. Did she ever say his name? Hope bit her lip. Only once. When she was sick. She said, if Lawrence ever finds out what Walter did, then she stopped. She didn't finish. Walter. Lawrence staggered backward. Walter was his former attorney, trusted, loyal, or so he had believed. And Walter had vanished from his company 5 years ago, cashing out all his shares with no warning. Something was deeply wrong. Someone had made sure Marie disappeared. Someone had made sure Lawrence never looked deeper. And now the truth was beginning to crack through the surface, like a dam ready to break. Lawrence's breath came in short bursts as the realization took root. Walter hadn't just disappeared. He had orchestrated something big, something cruel. And now the consequences of that betrayal sat before him in the form of 2 children, one cradled in the arms of the other. He crouched again, his voice tender, but edged with urgency. Hope, do you remember anything else? Anything your mother kept hidden? She hesitated, then slowly reached into the lining of the backpack. From a small tear in the fabric, she pulled out a folded square of silk, blue, faded, and frayed at the edges. It was a baby blanket. Embroidered in one corner were the initials, R.B. River Blake. Lawrence reached out, fingers trembling as he brushed the cloth. His knees hit the sidewalk again. She told me to keep this safe, Hope said, even when we had nothing else. Tears welled in his eyes. This wasn't a coincidence, it couldn't be. Every piece fit too perfectly. He looked again at the baby, who stirred slightly, a tiny fist opening and closing. Lawrence had spent nearly a decade believing he'd buried his family. But it wasn't grief that crushed him now. It was guilt. Guilt for not looking deeper, for believing what they told him, for letting her slip away. And then Hope whispered, sometimes Mama would talk to the stars. She said, if he ever finds us, maybe it'll mean he still remembers. He could barely hold himself together. I do, he murmured. I never stopped. Hope looked up at him again, eyes glistening. Then why didn't you come? The question shattered him. There were no words, no defense. Before he could respond, a woman's voice called out from across the street, sharp, distrustful. Hope, what are you doing? Hope flinched, quickly tucking the blanket back into the bag. Lawrence turned to see a thin woman in her late 40s striding across the pavement. Her expression was tense, eyes darting between Hope and him. She reached them in seconds. Step away from her, she snapped. I don't care who you are. Lawrence stood, unsure whether to explain or defend himself. I'm not trying to hurt her. I know exactly who you are, the woman interrupted. And you don't get to act innocent now. He blinked. You know me? She nodded grimly. Name's Carla. I knew Marie, and I know exactly what she went through. She didn't die by accident. She was running from you." Lawrence froze. Hope stood between them, eyes wide, the baby now beginning to cry softly in her arms. And as the cries grew louder, Carla stepped closer, her voice dropping. "She left you to protect them," she said. "And if you really want the truth, you better be ready to hear what Marie couldn't bring herself to say." The morning air hung thick with questions as Lawrence followed Carla down a narrow alley just off the avenue. Hope trailed behind them, clutching River close, her small steps quiet but steady. The alley opened into a small courtyard surrounded by decaying brick buildings. A rusted fire escape dangled overhead, and the scent of mildew clung to the walls. Carla led them into a second-floor flat, modest, cluttered, but clean. She gestured to a couch. "Sit. We're not done." Lawrence lowered himself onto the edge, his hands resting on his knees, body tense. Hope sat beside him, gently rocking River. Carla didn't speak for a long moment. She paced in front of them, arms crossed, eyes burning. "You have no idea what Marie went through, do you?" she finally said. "You were the man with the empire, the one she thought would save her. But when she got pregnant, everything changed." "I didn't abandon her," Lawrence said softly. "She left." You thought she died," Carla snapped. "Because that was easier, cleaner." He opened his mouth to argue, but she raised a hand. "I was there when she came to me, pregnant, scared. Your people had stopped answering her calls. Her access to money disappeared. She said she couldn't even get through to you." "That's not true," Lawrence said, shaking his head. "I would have answered. I tried to find her after she left. Someone made sure you couldn't." The room fell silent. Lawrence could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Carla walked to a drawer, pulled out a plastic envelope and handed it to him. Inside were printed copies of emails, phone logs, bank transfers. She pointed to the names. "Look closely. See who authorized the account closures, who redirected her calls." His hands trembled as he scanned the documents. Walter. Again and again, the name appeared like a ghost haunting every page. Lawrence leaned back, stunned. "He told me she was dead, that they identified her belongings at the crash site. He even handled the funeral arrangements." "He handled a lie," Carla said coldly. "He made sure Marie stayed invisible, paid off a private clinic where she gave birth, bribed a doctor to fake her medical records, and when she tried to leave the country with the baby, someone leaked her location. That's when she came to me." Lawrence felt like the floor had vanished beneath him. Every truth he had clung to was disintegrating. Carla sat down opposite him, her eyes softer now. "She never stopped loving you, but she believed you'd chosen power over her, that you let her disappear." "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know." Hope watched him quietly, her small fingers still wrapped around River's hand. Carla leaned forward. "She wrote you a letter. She never sent it. I think she was waiting for the right time." She pulled a folded yellowed envelope from a worn book on the shelf and placed it gently in Lawrence's hands. His name was written on the front, in Marie's handwriting. He hesitated, then slowly opened it. The paper was soft with age, the ink slightly smudged where tears had clearly once fallen. Lawrence unfolded it carefully as though it might crumble in his fingers. The moment his eyes met Marie's handwriting, his breath caught in his throat. "Lawrence, if you're reading this, it means everything I feared came true. Or maybe everything I still hoped for. I don't know anymore." His vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to keep going. "I never meant to leave you the way I did. I begged you to hear me, to see what was happening around us, but there was always a meeting, a deal, a call. And then, one day, silence. Everything was gone. My accounts, my calls, my name." Lawrence's hands clenched the edges of the page. "I thought it was you. I didn't want to believe it, but when Walter came and told me it was better this way, that you had agreed, it broke something in me. I didn't know who to trust. So I ran. For hope. For the baby I still carried." Hope looked up at him as he read, her face unreadable but intent. "I stayed quiet. I stayed hidden, and when River came, I named him after something that never stops moving, even when it's hurt. I thought that if I couldn't find peace, maybe he would. Tears slipped down Lawrence's face silently. Hope knows who you are. I showed her your face. I told her the good things, not the ones that broke me. Because I wanted her to hope, Lawrence. To believe that you could still be the man I fell in love with. The man who sang to my belly when he thought no one was listening. His breath caught on a sob. If you ever find them, please don't let them grow up thinking the world doesn't care. Don't let them become ghosts like I did. The last line was scrawled, hurried, almost like an afterthought. And Lawrence, if you still love me, find the truth, even if it hurts. He lowered the letter, his face buried in his hands. Carla was quiet now, watching. She never blamed you. Not fully. She blamed the people around you, the ones who decided for you. He looked at Hope again. I want to fix this, he whispered. You can't fix the past, Carla said gently, but you can face it. Lawrence turned to her, the steel returning slowly to his spine. Where is Walter now? Carla hesitated. Last I heard he was living offshore, Belize maybe, disappeared with millions in hush money. Lawrence's jaw tightened. Then I'll find him. Hope blinked. What will you do when you find him? He didn't answer right away, but in his mind he already saw it. The confrontation, the questions, the buried truths that still needed unearthing. Because somewhere under all the lies, there was still a piece of Marie's life and their children's, being held hostage by silence. And Lawrence Blake had stayed silent long enough. Lawrence barely slept that night. He checked into a modest hotel downtown, deliberately avoiding the penthouse suites and personal staff who would report his every move. For the first time in years, he needed privacy, not luxury. He spread the documents Carla had given him across the small desk, reviewing them under the dim yellow light of the bedside lamp. Phone logs, bank records, a fake death certificate for Marie Blake, issued by a clinic that no longer existed. Every trail pointed to Walter. Walter Hayes, his former legal counsel and once closest confidant, had been entrusted with everything, from Lawrence's business holdings to the most intimate details of his personal life. It made sense now. If someone wanted Marie gone without leaving fingerprints, Walter was the one person who could make it happen. But why? What did he gain from destroying Marie's life? Lawrence opened the letter again, rereading the final line. Find the truth, even if it hurts. A soft knock on the hotel room door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it cautiously to find Carla standing there, Hope asleep in her arms, River swaddled tightly in a borrowed blanket. She was too nervous to sleep without seeing you again, Carla said quietly. Lawrence nodded, stepping aside to let them in. He gently took Hope from her arms and laid the girl on the bed. River stirred, but didn't wake. Carla stood by the window, arms crossed. There's something else you should see. She pulled out a photograph from her bag and handed it over. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but Lawrence recognized the man instantly. Walter. Standing on a marina dock, speaking with a man in a white suit. In the background, a yacht, sleek and extravagant. The timestamp showed it was taken just 4 weeks ago. He's been coming and going from a private island off the coast of Belize, but the boat's registered under a shell company. I have people who can track him, Lawrence said, quietly. Carla narrowed her eyes. Quiet won't be enough. You need someone who knows how to get close. You? She gave a dry smile. Marie wasn't the only one who disappeared for a while. He studied her. There was steel behind the pain in her eyes. Regret and something else. Unfinished business. Lawrence looked over at Hope, sleeping peacefully for once, her small chest rising and falling. I'm not walking away again, he said. Good, Carla replied, because you're about to uncover things that go deeper than you realize. This wasn't just about Marie. What do you mean? Carla hesitated, then handed him a torn page from Marie's journal. Scrawled in rushed handwriting were 2 names, Walter Hayes and Nadia Sloan. Lawrence frowned. Who's Nadia Sloan? Carla's voice dropped. "She was your mother's private nurse." The room fell deathly still. Lawrence sat down heavily, the world tilting again. "My mother died when I was 16, he whispered. "Cancer." Carla nodded slowly. "Are you sure that's all she died from?" Lawrence stared at the name, his mind reaching back into the shadows of a past he rarely visited. His mother, Eleanor Blake, had been graceful, quiet, and intensely private. Even in her final months, she had kept her suffering behind a locked bedroom door. He remembered fragments, shuffling footsteps, muffled sobs, and the ever-present scent of chamomile and antiseptic. And always there, in the background, had been the nurse, Nadia Sloan. She had been with Eleanor until the very end. Lawrence had trusted her then, barely 18, consumed by grief, clinging to anyone who offered structure or calm. "What does she have to do with Marie?" he asked, his voice hollow. Carla sat down across from him. "Marie found out that Walter and Nadia were connected, not just through your mother, but through a private network of caregivers and handlers, people who worked behind the scenes for the ultra-wealthy. Some were hired to care, others to control." He felt something deep and cold sink into his gut. Control what? Emotions, secrets, people, Carla said. "Marie believed your mother didn't just die of cancer. She believed someone made sure Eleanor's will and everything attached to it was modified before her death." Lawrence swallowed hard. "My mother changed her will 2 weeks before she died. She left everything to a foundation Walter helped set up. I assumed it was what she wanted." "Did she ever tell you that?" He froze. The answer hit him with brutal clarity. No, she hadn't. She'd grown more distant in her final days. Walter had handled everything. Nadia had been the only constant. Carla continued, "Marie thought Walter didn't just steal your money. He stole your history, your roots, your sense of family. She found letters Eleanor had written, unsent drafts, where she questioned whether she was safe in her own home." Lawrence stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city stretched endlessly below, but it felt like he was trapped inside a cage of ghosts. "So all this time," he said slowly, "Walter wasn't just taking money. He was taking lives, silently, one by one." Carla nodded. "Marie told me that Nadia disappeared after Eleanor died, changed her name. Marie tried to track her down but always hit a wall." Hope stirred slightly on the bed, and Lawrence turned back to look at her. "My daughter grew up in fear," he whispered. "Because I let these people stay close to me. I let them call the shots." Carla stood, stepping beside him. "Then it's time to take that power back. But if you want the full truth, you're going to need to look deeper, into your family, into the people who built your empire." Lawrence met her gaze. "I thought I was building a legacy. Turns out, I was just protecting someone else's lies." Carla placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then start over. With them." He looked back at Hope, sleeping beside her baby brother. "I will." Then the hotel room phone rang. Shrill, unexpected. Lawrence froze, exchanged a glance with Carla, and picked it up slowly. "Mr. Blake?" came a low voice. Male, smooth, calculated. "You're asking too many questions." Then the line went dead. The silence after the call was suffocating. Lawrence held the receiver to his ear for a moment longer, as if the dial tone might give him more answers. Carla was already on her feet, moving to the window, scanning the street below with practiced eyes. "Do you think they know where we are?" she asked, her voice low. "They knew enough to find this number," Lawrence replied grimly, setting the phone down with care. Hope stirred again. This time she sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Lawrence said quickly, kneeling beside her. "You're safe, sweetheart, I promise." The words came naturally, too naturally, but they startled him. He hadn't called anyone sweetheart in years, not since Marie. Hope blinked at him. "You look scared." He paused, considering the honesty in her observation. Then he nodded. "I am, but only because I didn't protect you when I should have." She said nothing, only reached over and gently placed River into his arms. The gesture was quiet, but seismic. Lawrence sat there for a long moment, holding the infant for the first time. River was light, fragile, yet warm, a heartbeat of a second chance. Carla watched them silently, then cleared her throat. "I think it's time you saw the rest." "The rest of what?" She opened her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. The clasp was old but sturdy. Inside were a collection of cassette tapes, a worn recorder, and a stack of labeled tapes, each marked in Marie's handwriting. She recorded herself, Carla said, not just journal entries, thoughts, fears, memories. She said it was the only way she felt heard. Lawrence reached in and pulled one out. It was labeled simply, "For Lawrence, if I'm gone." His throat tightened. "Why didn't you show me this earlier?" She made me promise. "I couldn't give them to you until you'd read the letter, until you knew what you were walking into." He clicked the tape into the recorder, pressed play. The soft whir of the cassette gave way to Marie's voice, tired, low, but unmistakably hers. "Lawrence, I don't know if you'll ever hear this. Maybe you've moved on. Maybe Walter made sure you believed I was dead, but if you are listening, I want you to remember the night we danced in the kitchen after your big investor call. I was barefoot. You sang off key, and for just a moment, the world made sense." Lawrence shut his eyes, the memory washing over him like a tide he'd held back for too long. "River is your son. I never got to tell you that to your face. Hope. She's stronger than I ever was. She takes care of both of us, and I'm scared, not of dying, but of dying without you ever knowing the truth." Tears streamed down Lawrence's cheeks. "If you're hearing this, then you found them. Please don't let them be forgotten. Don't let him erase them too." The tape clicked off. Lawrence looked at Carla. "I'm going to Belize." She nodded. "Then I'm going with you." As the sun began to rise through the hotel curtains, Lawrence stood with a renewed fire in his chest. He wasn't just going to reclaim his family. He was going to unearth the rot that had poisoned everything he loved, and Walter, wherever he was finally going to answer. The jet touched down on the private runway in Belize just after midnight. The air was thick with humidity, and the night buzzed with the hum of insects and the distant crash of waves. Lawrence stepped onto the tarmac in clothes far less tailored than usual, light linen shirt, jeans, no entourage. Only Carla walked beside him, calm and focused. They had landed under aliases, using a network Carla still had ties to from her own shadowed past. The last thing they wanted was for Walter to know they were coming. "He docks his boat 3 miles up the coast," Carla said, pointing to a satellite photo she held in her hand. "The island's private, but there's no government oversight. Everything's managed by shell companies, security included." Lawrence looked at the photo. The outline of the estate was clear. A mansion, several outbuildings, a helipad, and a yacht anchorage with a path into the jungle. "What about surveillance?" he asked. "He's got cameras, but the shoreline to the south is exposed at low tide. We can get through by foot if we move quickly and stay quiet." Lawrence nodded. "Let's go." They drove in silence, a rented SUV navigating the twisting jungle roads until it couldn't go further. From there, they hiked. It took over an hour to reach the edge of the mangrove forest. At the break in the trees, they saw it, Walter's estate, lit up like a beacon in the darkness. "I still don't understand why he did this," Lawrence said, crouched behind a tree. "What could he possibly gain from tearing everything apart?" Carla exhaled. "It wasn't just money. Marie believed it was about legacy, about envy. Walter didn't want to be your shadow anymore. He wanted your place. If he couldn't be you, he'd destroy everything that made you who you were." Lawrence clenched his fists. He almost did. They waited until the tide began to pull back. Moonlight lit the path across the sand. They moved quickly, silently, until they reached the outer wall. Carla pulled a small device from her bag, a signal jammer, and flipped the switch. "Cameras out," she said. Lawrence climbed over first, landing softly in the damp soil of the garden. Carla followed. They moved through the hedges toward the back of the estate, where a faint glow came from an office window. Inside, a man stood at a desk, swirling a drink in his hand, staring at a laptop. "Walter." Even from here, Lawrence recognized him. The silver-streaked hair, the smug posture. He reached for the small recorder in his pocket, the one with Marie's voice. He pressed it once, letting her words echo softly in his mind. "Please don't let them be forgotten." He stepped out from the hedge and walked straight toward the window. This wasn't about stealth anymore. It was about truth. And finally, it was time to confront it. Walter looked up just as Lawrence stepped through the open patio doors, the night breeze sweeping in behind him like a ghost from the past. For a split second, the older man's expression faltered, just enough to betray recognition and something else: fear. "Well," Walter said, setting his drink down with exaggerated calm, "if it isn't the ghost of Lawrence Blake, I thought you'd be enjoying your empire, not creeping around my garden like a thief." Lawrence stepped forward slowly. "You stole my life." Walter gave a short laugh. "I protected your legacy. You were on the brink of collapse. Marie, God rest her soul, was unraveling. You were too blind to see it." "Don't speak her name," Lawrence said through clenched teeth. "You lied to me. You told me she died. You forged reports, paid off doctors. You let me bury an empty coffin." Walter shrugged. "You were grieving. It was the cleanest solution." Lawrence's hands trembled. "Why?" "You wouldn't understand," Walter said, circling the desk like a man still in control. "You had everything handed to you, your mother's trust, your father's business, Marie's devotion. And what did you do with it? You neglected it, all of it. I kept things running when you couldn't." "You kept things running by erasing people," Lawrence said, voice low. "You erased my wife. You tried to erase my children." Walter's eyes narrowed. "Children?" Lawrence saw the twitch in his jaw. That was the crack. He hadn't known about Hope, about River. "You thought you buried the truth, but she survived, Walter, and so did they." For the first time, Walter looked unsteady. "Marie kept everything," Lawrence said. "Tapes, letters, journals. She knew what you were doing. And now I know too." Walter's voice rose. "And what do you plan to do? March back to your empire and cry scandal? You think the board will let you torch everything over a woman who ran away? She didn't run. You forced her out. You isolated her. You cut off her access to me, to money, to safety. Then you set the fire and watched it burn from your yacht." Walter scoffed, turning away. "You don't have proof." Lawrence reached into his pocket and pressed play on the recorder. Marie's voice filled the room. "Fan, if he ever finds you, Walter, just know you never broke me. You never broke us. My children will know who they are. He will know what you did." The silence after the tape stopped was deafening. Walter's shoulders stiffened. "She was unstable." "She was smarter than both of us," Lawrence said, "and she left a trail." Suddenly the sound of a door creaked open down the hall. Footsteps echoed. A woman stepped into the room, tall, elegant, silver hair twisted in a bun. Carla inhaled sharply. "Nadia Sloan." Walter turned, startled. "You're not supposed to be here." But Nadia raised a hand. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Enough, Walter. It's over." The room stood suspended in silence as Nadia Sloan stepped fully into the light. Her face, once etched in Lawrence's memory only as a shadow beside his dying mother, was now clear, older, colder, and eerily calm. Walter stared at her, betrayal written across his face. "You don't speak for me." "I speak for what's left of your soul," Nadia replied softly, walking past him to stand between him and Lawrence. "And I'm tired of guarding your secrets." Lawrence took a step closer, eyes locked on hers. "Did you help him fake Marie's death? Were you part of it?" Nadia looked down, then back at him. "I didn't know about Marie at first. I thought I was just helping manage Eleanor's affairs. Walter told me your mother wanted her will changed, that she wanted everything protected in case you lost focus." "I was 19, Lawrence said, focused on saving her." "She was scared," Nadia admitted, "and she never signed the final draft Walter gave her. That was forged. He took control the moment she passed and told me if I ever spoke a word, I'd lose everything." Carla stepped forward, voice sharp. So you stayed quiet and watched him destroy everyone else's life too? Nadia's voice cracked. At first, yes. Then I tried to disappear. I changed my name. But I watched from a distance. I knew one day someone would come asking. Lawrence's voice was ice. You let me believe my mother died on her terms, that she trusted you. She did, Nadia whispered, but not at the end. Walter moved again, this time toward the drawer in his desk. Carla's eyes darted. He's reaching, she warned. But before she could act, Walter yanked open the drawer and pulled out a sleek pistol. None of this matters, he snarled. You think a few recordings and old papers will bring down the life I built? Don't, Lawrence said, stepping in front of Carla. You were always weak, Walter said, leveling the gun at him. You cared too much. You let love make you soft. And you let hate make you blind, Lawrence said. You destroyed the only people who ever believed in you. Nadia stepped beside Walter, hands raised. Put it down, Walter. You're not that man. I already am, he growled. But before he could move, another voice rang out from behind them, a voice that froze Walter in place. Please don't hurt him. Hope. She stood at the edge of the room, River wrapped in a sling across her chest, her small frame trembling, but her eyes unwavering. Carla gasped. How did you... I followed, Hope said. I had to know. Walter's gun wavered, just slightly. And in that hesitation, the last mask cracked, because in Hope's eyes he didn't see a threat. He saw the proof that everything he'd tried to erase had survived, and was standing in front of him. Walter's hand trembled as he looked at Hope. The gun, once held with arrogant certainty, now quivered slightly in the air. Lawrence stood frozen, his breath caught, his body poised to protect her. Hope didn't move. She simply stared at the man who had stolen her family's past, her expression unreadable. You were the one Mama cried about, she said quietly. The one who made her disappear. Walter's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His mouth closed again. Please, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama said people who hurt others do it because they're hurt too, but she said that's no excuse. Lawrence felt a tremor of something ancient and painful stir inside him. Guilt, yes, but also awe. Hope wasn't just surviving. She was choosing to confront the darkness with dignity beyond her years. Walter slowly lowered the gun, just slightly. She was supposed to go away quietly. I paid for her care. I didn't know about the kids. I didn't want it to go that far. Yet it did, Carla said, stepping forward now, her voice edged with fire. And you let it happen. You chose this. You chose erasure, control, lies. Walter's shoulders sagged. I built everything with him, and I was nothing more than a shadow. Always the assistant, the fixer, never the man at the table. Lawrence shook his head. You were my friend. I trusted you more than anyone. And you used that to destroy the people I loved most. Walter looked at him, and for the first time, real emotion flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps. Maybe shame. I didn't think she'd survive the crash. I didn't expect her to run. But when she did, I kept quiet. Because I knew if she came back, everything would unravel. Everything I stole. And by then, I didn't know how to stop. Nadia moved slowly toward him. Then stop now. Walter looked at her, then at Hope, then at the gun in his hand. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then he let it fall. The metal clattered to the floor, with a sound that echoed in all their chests. Carla stepped forward, picked it up and handed it silently to Lawrence. I'll call the local authorities, she said, but we need more than an arrest. We need evidence. Lawrence looked around the room, papers on Walter's desk, the hard drive on the computer, ledgers half hidden in drawers. This whole estate, he said, is built on the ruins of my family. We're going to tear it down. Every lie, every shell company, every last trace of what he tried to bury. Hope walked to him slowly, took his hand. Will we go home after? Lawrence knelt beside her. Yes, he whispered. We're going home. But before he could rise, Carla opened a folder on the desk and froze. "Lawrence, you need to see this." He stood and walked to her. The folder was thick, filled with confidential documents. Inside, contracts, falsified adoption records, medical reports, and one photo of a baby, with the name Ethan Blake printed below. Lawrence's heart stopped. "I don't understand," he said. "That was our son's name, but River, his name is River." Carla turned the page, and there, in Marie's handwriting, were 4 chilling words. River was not alone. Lawrence stared at the page, his hands suddenly cold. The words blurred, but the meaning hit with the force of an earthquake. River was not alone. He looked up at Carla, then down at Hope, who stood silently beside him, eyes wide and frightened. "There was another child?" he asked, his voice cracking. Carla nodded slowly. "It looks that way. If this is real, Marie gave birth to twins." Hope stepped forward. "Mama never said. She only talked about River. I thought maybe she meant me, but..." Her voice trailed off, her eyes searching Lawrence's face for something he didn't yet know how to give. Nadia sat down heavily, shock finally catching up to her. She must have kept it from everyone. Even the clinic records I helped forge never mentioned twins. Lawrence turned the page in the folder. Another photo, blurry, clearly taken with a hidden camera. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, dark hair, hazel eyes that mirrored his own. The photo had been printed just 2 years ago. The back was stamped with a date and a location. Guatemala City. "Who is he?" Lawrence whispered. Carla pointed to a typed summary clipped to the back of the photo. "Says here he was taken to a private orphanage after a failed relocation. No name, no known parentage. But someone, Walter, was tracking him." Walter, now sitting in silence, eyes vacant, muttered, "I couldn't risk the second child surfacing. She didn't want to give him up, but she was too weak. She got sick, the clinic, and they called me. I paid for one baby to stay with her. The other went away quietly." Lawrence lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar. "You stole my son." Walter didn't fight. "I did what I thought would keep everything intact." "You tore a family in half," Lawrence spat. "You destroyed lives, children's lives." Hope was trembling now. "There's another River." Carla placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Maybe not another River, but someone like him. Someone like you." Lawrence turned to Nadia. "Can this be traced? Can we find the orphanage?" She nodded slowly, guilt thick in her voice. "I know people who still owe me favors. We can find him." Lawrence looked down at the boy's photo again, the hazel eyes that matched Hope's and Marie's and his own. Another lost child, another piece of Marie's legacy. "We're not leaving Belize," he said, his voice firm. "Not until we find him." Carla nodded. "Then we start tomorrow, and this time we don't stop until the last lie is gone." Lawrence took Hope in his arms, River cradled between them. The storm wasn't over, not yet. But now he had something he hadn't had in a long time. Direction, purpose, and the unshakable resolve to bring every piece of his family home. The morning broke over Belize with a slow golden light as Lawrence stood on the balcony of a safe house Carla had arranged. The sun shimmered over the sea in the distance, but his gaze was fixed on the photo of the boy Ethan, still clutched in his hand. Somewhere out there was a child who bore his blood, who had lived unknown, unnamed, unprotected. Behind him, Hope sat cross-legged on the floor, gently humming the lullaby that had started it all. River dozed in her lap, peaceful for now. Carla stepped into the room, coffee in one hand, a file in the other. "I found the orphanage," she said. "Run by a private group under a different name every 3 years, hidden behind medical charities. And guess who helped fund the Shell Corporation?" Lawrence didn't look up. "Walter," she nodded. "But here's the twist. The boy? He's not there anymore." He turned, sharp and alert. "Where is he?" "Transferred out 18 months ago. No public record. But I found a pattern. Children sponsored by international donors, high-value adoptions, off the books. Ethan was one of them. Lawrence felt his chest constrict. Adopted? By whom? Carla flipped the folder open and laid it on the table. A photo, a couple. Wealthy, white, American, standing outside a private jet with a boy, Ethan, maybe 7 at the time, held by the hand, looking dazed and uncertain. The couple's last known address is in Charleston, South Carolina, Carla said. The adoption was handled through a legal firm with direct ties to Walter's offshore accounts. Lawrence swallowed hard. He sold my son. Carla didn't argue. He leaned against the wall, head spinning. Does Ethan even know who he is? Doubtful, she replied. He was given a new name, new identity, no trace of Marie, no trace of you. Hope had stopped humming. She stood slowly. So, I have a brother out there who doesn't even know we're his family. Lawrence walked over and knelt in front of her. Yes, and I'm going to find him. Hope tilted her head. What if he doesn't want to be found? The question sliced deep. But Lawrence answered truthfully, then I'll still be there, even if he doesn't remember us, and we'll remember him. Carla picked up her bag. We need to leave by noon. I booked seats on a commercial flight under aliases. No private jets, too easy to trace. You, me, Hope, and River. We land in Charleston by midnight. Lawrence nodded. Hope took his hand again. Will he look like me? Lawrence smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. I think he already does. As they gathered their things, one thought echoed through Lawrence's mind like a drumbeat. If Walter had spent a decade trying to bury the truth, then what lay ahead would be even harder to unearth. But he had no choice now. He had to bring Ethan home. The flight to Charleston was long, but Lawrence barely noticed. He sat beside Hope, River cradled against his chest, eyes fixed on the clouds outside the window. Carla dozed lightly in the row behind them, but Lawrence's mind was racing with images of Ethan. He couldn't reconcile the boy in the photo, distant, lost, carefully groomed, with the life Marie might have imagined for him. When they landed, the air was cooler, gentler than Belize. Carla had arranged a car under a new alias, and by morning they were parked outside a sprawling estate on the edge of Charleston's historic district. The iron gate bore the name The Harlans in gold lettering. Their new money, Carla explained, adjusting a baseball cap low over her brow. Oil contracts, private security. They keep a low profile, but everything about them screams control. She handed Lawrence a pair of binoculars. Look at the far garden. Lawrence lifted them slowly. His heart skipped. There he was. A boy, maybe 9 now, kicking a ball alone in the grass. His hair was darker than Hope's, but the curve of his jaw, the shape of his ears, it was unmistakable. Ethan. Lawrence lowered the binoculars and turned to Carla. What's the plan? We wait for the boy to be alone. No confrontation at the gate. No sudden movements. We need to know what he knows, if he knows. Hope leaned forward from the back seat, whispering, He looks lonely. Lawrence felt a pang he wasn't ready for. Just like you did, he replied softly. They waited until afternoon, when the boy wandered to the far corner of the estate near the fence line. Lawrence slipped out of the car, careful, every step deliberate. Hope stayed behind, watching through the window, fingers pressed to the glass. Lawrence approached the fence, keeping distance. Hey there, he said gently. The boy looked up, eyes alert, cautious. I'm not here to scare you, I just saw you kicking the ball. The boy narrowed his eyes, stepping closer to the fence. Are you lost? Lawrence smiled. Maybe a little. What's your name? The boy asked, clearly instructed to stay wary. Lawrence hesitated. My name is Lawrence. The boy tilted his head. My name used to be Ethan, I think, but now they call me Kyle. Lawrence's knees nearly buckled. Used to be? He nodded. They said I came from a bad place, that my old name didn't matter anymore. Lawrence knelt down, trying to steady his voice. It matters. More than you know. The boy's brow furrowed. Do you know my mum? A breath caught in Lawrence's throat. Yes, he whispered. Yes, I do. Do you know what she looked like? The boy asked, stepping even closer. Lawrence reached into his pocket and slowly pulled out the folded photo, the same one Marie had kept all those years. He handed it through the fence. The boy stared at it for a long moment. Then, in a whisper that shattered everything, he said, "She sings in my dreams." Lawrence felt the breath leave his body. "She sings in your dreams?" he echoed, his voice trembling. Ethan, no, Kyle, as he'd been renamed, nodded slowly. His small fingers brushed the edge of the photo. "I don't remember much, just sometimes I hear her voice, a song. The same one, over and over." He looked up, uncertain. "It makes me feel like I'm not really alone." Lawrence swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you remember the words?" Kyle furrowed his brow, eyes searching the air. Then, almost shyly, he began to hum. It was faint, a half-remembered rhythm, but Lawrence knew it instantly. The lullaby. Marie's lullaby. Tears welled in his eyes as he gripped the fence post. "She used to sing that to you when you were a baby. You have a sister, Hope, and a brother, River." The boy froze. "A sister?" "Yes," Lawrence said. "And I'm your father." Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Kyle stepped back, his face unreadable. "But they told me I didn't have a family, that my mom left me." "That my name didn't mean anything." Lawrence's heart cracked. "They lied to you. I didn't know you were alive. I didn't even know there were two of you. But your mother, she never stopped loving you. She protected you the only way she could." Kyle stared at the photo again, as if trying to summon a memory. "Why now?" he asked. "Why are you here now?" "Because someone stole you from us," Lawrence said. "And now I'm here to bring you back." Before Kyle could respond, a sharp voice rang out across the yard. "Kyle, what are you doing? Get away from there!" A tall woman in expensive clothing stormed across the lawn, eyes locked on the fence. Lawrence stepped back instinctively. The woman yanked Kyle's arm, pulling him away. "Who are you? What the hell are you doing talking to my son?" "I'm his father," Lawrence said, steady and firm, "and I think you know that's the truth." She paled, just for a moment. Then her face twisted. "You need to leave now, before I call security." Kyle pulled against her hand. "But Mom, he knew the song. "Get in the house," she snapped. Carla appeared behind Lawrence, having moved quickly from the car. "He's not going anywhere, and neither is the boy. We've already contacted legal counsel, and we have documentation that will hold up in court." The woman sneered. "You think you can just come here and take him?" "No," Lawrence said, eyes locked on hers. "I came here to tell him the truth." The woman dragged Kyle toward the house, but his voice rang out over her shoulder, desperate, confused, filled with something Lawrence hadn't expected. "Hope! Wait! Don't go! Tell me more! Please!" But the door slammed behind them, and Lawrence stood frozen at the fence, the photo still in his hand, the echo of Marie's lullaby haunting the silence. Back at the safe house, the air was thick with tension. Lawrence sat motionless, staring at the blank wall while Carla paced. Hope stood by the window, arms wrapped around River, her small face set in quiet determination. "He remembered the song," Lawrence said, almost in disbelief. "After everything they told him, he still remembered her." "That's not nothing," Carla replied, crossing her arms. "It's more than most kids in those situations can hold on to. It means there's a thread, a connection." "But it's not enough," Lawrence muttered. "That woman, she's not just scared, she's hiding something. The way she reacted, it wasn't just fear, it was guilt." "She knows," Carla said. "She knows he wasn't legally hers. They were paid off, guaranteed protection. Walter made it look official, but it was a lie." Hope turned from the window. "Can we get him back?" Lawrence looked at her. Her voice was quiet but sure, the same calm strength Marie had carried. "We're going to try," he said, "but we have to do it right. If we push too fast, she'll disappear with him." Carla pulled out her laptop and sat at the table. "I already sent the documents to 2 attorneys in Charleston. One of them's a custody rights expert. If we can prove identity theft, fraud in the adoption process, and that Ethan was taken under false pretenses, we can challenge her guardianship. Lawrence finished, "and bring him home. Assuming he wants to come," Carla added, not unkindly. "He's not a baby anymore. And he's been told a version of reality for most of his life." Lawrence nodded slowly. "Then I'll give him the truth. I'll give him every piece of his past that they tried to bury." He walked to the bag beside the bed and pulled out Marie's journal, the one Hope had carried for years. The torn pages, the sketches, the scattered fragments of her grief. He found a folded sheet tucked inside the back cover. A drawing. 2 babies sleeping beside each other, arms curled in the shape of a heart. Hope came closer. "Mama used to say I had a twin when I was little. I thought it was just a dream," she told me. Lawrence held the drawing in trembling hands. She never gave up on him, not even when she was dying. Carla's phone buzzed. She read the screen, her eyes narrowing. "The lawyer just called. There's something odd in the paperwork. The woman, Janine Harland, never finalized Ethan's U.S. citizenship. It was supposed to happen after the adoption. But the file's incomplete." "What does that mean?" "It means Ethan's still legally in limbo, and that gives us a window." Lawrence felt something shift inside him, a flicker of possibility, of justice. "Then that's our move," he said. "We go to court. We prove who he is. We bring the truth to light." Hope stepped beside him and placed her hand over his. "I'll be brave," she said softly. Lawrence met her gaze, his voice a whisper. "We'll all be brave." Then Carla looked up again, her expression tightening. "There's one more thing. Ethan, he's not the only one in that house." "What?" Carla turned the screen toward them. A grainy surveillance photo showed Janine Harland standing next to a man in a grey blazer. Lawrence's heart stopped. He knew that face. It was Walter, alive, free, and back in the picture. The weight of the revelation hung over the room like a thundercloud. Walter hadn't fled. He hadn't gone underground. He had followed them, had inserted himself back into the boy's life through Janine Harland, pulling strings in plain sight, as if daring them to confront him again. Lawrence clenched his fists. He never left. He's been with Ethan this whole time. Carla nodded, her voice low. "And not just watching. That photo was taken 3 days ago. He's still manipulating everything, controlling the narrative, just like he did with Marie." Hope stood frozen, staring at the screen. "Why won't he stop?" Lawrence looked at her, his voice steady but trembling with rage. "Because he's afraid. Not of us. Of the truth. Of Marie's story becoming real. Of you and River and Ethan becoming the family he tried to erase." Carla walked across the room and opened another file. "This is bigger than custody. If Walter is involved, and if he helped stage the adoption with Janine under false documents, it becomes a federal crime. Fraud, conspiracy, maybe even trafficking." Lawrence exhaled slowly. "Then we go after all of it." "But you'll have to testify," Carla said, "about Marie, about what happened. You'll have to expose everything, including your own silence." Lawrence nodded. "Then I will. For her. For them." Hope came to his side and slid her small hand into his. "When we get Ethan back, will he come live with us?" Lawrence dropped to one knee and looked her in the eyes. "Only if he wants to. But we'll always make a place for him. Just like there's always been one for you." She nodded fiercely. "Then let's bring him home." Carla checked the time. "The lawyer's meeting us at the courthouse tomorrow morning. She's filing an emergency petition to freeze Ethan's relocation. If Janine tries to run, we'll stop her, but we need one more thing." "What?" Lawrence asked. "A statement. From you, detailing everything Walter did. Signed. Sworn. We'll include Marie's letter and the recordings. They have to feel her voice in every word." Lawrence sat at the table, pulled out the pen and opened the folder. He began to write. About Marie, about the fire, the lies, the silence that nearly swallowed them, and the girl who broke through it with a lullaby on a street corner. As the ink dried, Carla packed the evidence. Outside, the wind picked up. Clouds gathered, and Lawrence knew the storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. The courthouse in downtown Charleston loomed tall and quiet under a gray morning sky. Lawrence stood at the entrance, dressed simply, flanked by Carla and his attorney. a sharp, composed woman named Ruth Delaney. Hope held his hand tightly, River bundled in her arms, his tiny face barely visible beneath the knit cap someone at the safe house had gifted them. Inside, the air felt sterile and cold. Paperwork rustled. Heels clicked on marble floors. A judge's clerk ushered them into a private hearing room, the kind reserved for emergency family court matters. No press, no distractions, just the truth, laid bare. Ruth placed the thick file on the table. The judge has already reviewed the documents, but he'll want to hear from you directly. Be honest, be calm, let your voice carry what the paper can't. Lawrence nodded. He had rehearsed this a dozen times in his mind. But now that the moment had arrived, it wasn't nerves that rattled inside him. It was Marie's voice, her words, her lullaby, her plea not to forget. The door opened, and a bailiff entered. "You're up next." Hope looked at him. "Will he believe you?" Lawrence knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know, but he'll hear me." When they entered the chamber, the judge, a measured man with silver-framed glasses and kind, observant eyes, motioned for them to sit. Across the room sat Janine Harland, lips tight, eyes defiant. And next to her, wearing the exact same smug composure Lawrence remembered from Belize, was Walter. The sight of him turned Lawrence's stomach, but he kept his expression calm. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Blake, we've reviewed your emergency petition, as well as the attached documentation and the recording. This is an unusual case, one entangled in international custody and complex fraud. I need to ask you directly, why now? Why bring this forward after nearly a decade?" Lawrence stood. He looked first at Hope, then at Janine, then finally at the judge. His voice, when it came, was steady but heavy with emotion. "Because I didn't know the truth until 3 weeks ago. I was told my wife died in a car crash, that our son died with her. I mourned them. I buried them." He paused, swallowing hard. "What I didn't know was that she survived. That someone, this man," he pointed to Walter, "engineered her disappearance, cut her off from me, forced her into hiding, and when she was too sick to fight, he took one of our children and sold him into a falsified adoption." A gasp rippled across the room. The judge raised a hand for silence. Lawrence continued. "Ethan Blake, renamed Kyle Harland, is not Janine's biological son. He is mine. And I have reason to believe that she and Walter Hayes knowingly participated in an illegal international transfer of custody under falsified documents. I'm not just here to claim my son. I'm here to give him his name back." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have anything from the mother?" Ruth stood. "Yes, Your Honor. A handwritten letter, a sworn statement, and 12 recorded tapes in which she names Walter Hayes as the person responsible for orchestrating the fraud. The voice has been verified. The handwriting matched to samples from her journal." The judge took a deep breath. "Very well. We'll pause for 1 hour to review the materials. You will all remain on the premises. No one leaves." Walter didn't flinch, but Lawrence saw the corner of his mouth twitch. As the judge exited the room, Hope climbed into Lawrence's lap. "He heard you," she said softly. Lawrence held her tight. "Yes," he whispered. "Now we wait." The hour stretched like a lifetime. Every tick of the courthouse clock echoed through Lawrence's mind. Across the room, Janine whispered furiously to her lawyer, eyes darting between the door and Walter, who sat with practiced indifference, hands folded, face expressionless, but the tension in his jaw betraying the truth. He was cornered. Hope rested her head on Lawrence's shoulder, quietly humming the lullaby again. Each note was like a tether, grounding him to the only thing that mattered now, his children's safety, their truth. Carla returned from the hallway with a quiet nod. "Security's been notified. If either of them tries to leave after the hearing, they'll be detained." Lawrence met her eyes. "Thank you for all of this." She gave a small smile. "This isn't just for you, Lawrence. Marie was my friend, and I promised her someone would finish what she started." The door opened. The judge stepped back in, papers in hand. Everyone stood. He motioned for them to sit. "I've reviewed the material," he began, his voice crisp but not unkind. "The evidence presented shows, without reasonable doubt, that a child, Ethan Blake, was removed from the custody of his biological mother under fraudulent pretenses and later adopted through illicit means, bypassing both local and international law." Janine's breath hitched audibly. Walter didn't move. "The court finds substantial grounds to suspect that Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Harland knowingly engaged in deceptive practices to conceal the child's identity, origin, and legal parentage." He looked at Walter, then at Janine. "Until these matters are resolved in full, custody of Ethan Blake is to be immediately suspended from the Harlands and transferred to Mr. Lawrence Blake, pending final verification of biological relation through expedited testing, which this court will authorize today." Hope sat up straight, clutching Lawrence's hand tighter. Janine stood. "Your Honor, he doesn't even know the boy. Ethan, Kyle, doesn't know him. You're tearing his life apart." The judge didn't waver. "Ma'am, this court is not tearing anything apart. It is restoring what was wrongfully taken." Walter stood slowly, but before he could speak, 2 federal agents entered the room. One approached him. "Walter Hayes, you are under federal investigation for conspiracy, international child trafficking, and fraud." For the first time, Lawrence saw fear crack Walter's carefully constructed mask. He didn't resist as the agents escorted him from the room. Janine's lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgently. She crumpled into her chair, speechless. The judge turned to Lawrence. "Mr. Blake, the boy will remain in the Harlands' care for 48 hours until the order is processed. You may begin supervised visits immediately." Lawrence nodded, emotions swirling too fast to name. "Thank you, Your Honor." The gavel came down. "This hearing is adjourned." As the room emptied, Hope turned to him, her eyes shining. "We're getting him back?" Lawrence scooped her into his arms. "Yes, sweetheart, we're getting him back." But as they stepped into the hallway, Carla touched his arm. "You need to know something. That last tape, the one we didn't play yet?" Lawrence blinked. "What about it?" Carla handed him the recorder. "Marie left it for Ethan." Lawrence took the device with reverent hands, and as he pressed play, her voice, soft, tired, full of aching love, filled the corridor. "My sweet boy, if you're hearing this, it means your daddy found you." Marie's voice floated through the recorder like a ghost wrapped in warmth, gentle and careful, like she was whispering from the edge of sleep. Lawrence froze in the hallway, Hope and Carla motionless beside him. The words felt sacred, more than evidence. This was her reaching across time, across fear, across death itself. "Ethan, I don't know where you are, or who they've told you are, but I know one thing for certain. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not replaceable." Lawrence clenched the device tighter, his hand trembling. "I named you Ethan because it means strong, and I prayed every day that somehow you'd remember your name, even if you forgot mine." Hope rested her head on Lawrence's arm. He looked down at her, his heart caught between grief and wonder. Marie had known, deeply, prophetically, that their family would be torn, but not broken. "You have a sister. Her name is Hope. She's your light, and a brother, River, soft and brave. You 3 are the parts of me that couldn't be erased." Lawrence turned to Carla. Her eyes were damp. She said nothing. "And you have a father. Maybe by the time you hear this, he's found you. If so, trust your heart. He was once the best man I knew, and I have to believe that he still is." The message ended with a faint click. Silence swelled in its wake. Carla cleared her throat. "You need to play this for Ethan. Not in court, not through lawyers. In person. Just you and him." Lawrence nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "When do I get to see him?" Ruth appeared around the corner, clipboard in hand. "Now. He's waiting in the adjacent room with a child advocate." "He asked for you." Lawrence's knees nearly gave out. "He asked." Ruth nodded, a small smile forming. "He wants to understand. He said, if he knew my mum, I want to ask him what she was like." Hope tugged at Lawrence's sleeve. "Can I come?" He shook his head gently. "Not yet. Let me talk to him first. Then we'll all be together." Hope nodded, trusting. "Tell him I saved him a seat." Lawrence stepped toward the door with the tape recorder pressed to his chest. Every step was heavy with memory, with anticipation, with love he hadn't known how to carry until now. He opened the door slowly. Ethan sat at a table by the window, small, still, legs swinging off the chair, fingers nervously drumming. He turned as Lawrence entered. Their eyes met. Recognition wasn't immediate, but something else was. An echo, a pull. Lawrence took a step closer. "I have something for you," he said softly. "It's from your mom." Ethan sat straighter. "She knew me." Lawrence nodded. "She never stopped." He placed the recorder on the table, pressed play. And as Marie's voice filled the room once more, Ethan's lips parted, his breath shallow. Then came the first tear, and the whisper, "I remember that voice." The moment stretched, delicate, sacred, as Marie's voice filled the quiet room. Ethan's hand hovered just above the recorder, like he was afraid touching it would make the sound stop. His eyes shone with a bewildered kind of wonder, not fully understanding, yet feeling everything. Lawrence stayed quiet, letting the voice of the woman who had bound them both in blood and memory speak for them now. When the recording ended, Ethan wiped his cheeks with the back of his hand and looked up. "She really sang to me?" Lawrence's voice cracked as he nodded. "She sang to you every night. You were the quieter twin, always listening. She said you'd hum in your sleep." Ethan tilted his head. "And you? Did you sing too?" A soft laugh broke through Lawrence's tears. "Badly, but yes. I used to hold her belly and make up silly songs. You always kicked when I hit the high notes." A flicker of a smile danced on Ethan's lips. "She said I'm strong." "You are," Lawrence said. "You always were." Ethan looked down. "Then why didn't you find me sooner?" The question landed like a stone. Lawrence pulled the chair beside him and sat. "Because I didn't know you existed," he said honestly. "I thought I lost everything in that accident. Your mother, she was forced to keep you a secret. She protected your sister and your brother. She fought for you all the way to the end." Ethan's brow furrowed. "I remember her crying, in the dark. I think I knew her, even after they told me she was nobody." Lawrence swallowed back the emotion. "She was everything, and she left pieces of herself for you to find when you were ready." A pause. Ethan leaned forward, eyes wide. "Do I really have a sister?" "Yes," Lawrence smiled. "Her name is Hope. She's brave. And she's been waiting to meet you." "And my brother?" "River," Lawrence said softly. "He's still a baby, but when he sees you, he lights up. Like he knows." Ethan sat quietly, absorbing it all. Then, carefully, he reached for the recorder and pulled it close. "Can I keep this?" "It's yours," Lawrence said. "Every word she left behind belongs to you now." Ethan nodded. "I want to see them. Hope and River." "I'd like that," Lawrence whispered. He stood and held out his hand. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then placed his small fingers in Lawrence's, and as they walked to the door together, something fragile but profound settled between them. Not the certainty of family, not yet, but the beginning of it. Just before Lawrence turned the handle, Ethan looked up again. "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Anything," Lawrence said. "Will you teach me her song?" Lawrence smiled, eyes wet. "I think Hope would like to help with that." And together, they stepped into the hallway, where Hope stood waiting, holding River, and for the first time, all three children of Marie Blake were under one roof. Together. The door clicked open, and Ethan stepped into the hallway, his hand still in Lawrence's. Hope's eyes lit up the moment she saw him. She stood up straighter, River snuggled in her arms, her expression somewhere between awe and nervous anticipation. Ethan paused, unsure, until Hope smiled. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm your sister. We've been waiting for you." He blinked, then took a step closer. Your Hope?" She nodded. "Mama used to say your name to me when she thought I was sleeping. She never forgot." He stared at her, at River in her arms, then back at Lawrence. "She really kept us all," Lawrence's voice caught. "She never let any of you go. Not in her heart. Not for a second." Hope stepped forward and gently extended River toward him. "This is River. He kicks like you used to." Ethan chuckled, hesitant at first, then reached out and gently touched River's tiny fingers. The baby grabbed hold instinctively, and Ethan gasped, startled. "He's strong." Hope grinned. "He likes you already." Carla watched from a distance, her arms crossed over her chest, eyes glassy. "Looks like Marie finally got her wish." Lawrence turned to her. "Thank you for carrying her story when I couldn't." Carla nodded. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything." "Raise them with the truth. Don't let your world swallow theirs." He nodded, eyes full. "I won't." A court officer approached with final paperwork. Ruth stepped forward, whispering, "It's done. You have temporary custody. Full guardianship will follow after verification, but for now they're yours." Lawrence signed without hesitation. As the ink dried, he looked at the 3 children before him. Hope with her calm eyes and quiet courage, River with his tiny hands and open trust, and Ethan, standing taller now, the fog slowly lifting from his young face. They were strangers, made siblings by truth and blood and memory. Lawrence knelt beside them. "I don't know everything. I won't pretend I do. But if you let me, I'll try every day to be the father she believed I could be." Hope nodded. Ethan hesitated, then asked, "Can we go home now?" Lawrence stood, lifting River into his arms. "Yes," he said. "Let's go home." They walked out together, into sunlight, into a future rebuilt from ashes and lullabies. And as the doors of the courthouse closed behind them, the wind carried a faint echo through the square. A melody, a woman's voice, a promise never broken, and 3 children stepping forward to live the legacy she died protecting. A legacy not of wealth, but of love remembered. Of family reclaimed, of hope at last restored.